Everyone for coming. Oh, great. Thank you, Mark. Excellent. Good evening, everybody. My name is Christine Sipnowich, and I'm the chairperson of the Coalition of Kingston Communities. And as you may know, the Coalition is an umbrella organization with over 25 community groups who participate in its activities. And we share, despite our diversity in terms of the issues that we care about, we do share a concern for accountability at City Hall. And in light of that mission, we, in 2018, organized some all candidates meetings, particularly in those districts which didn't have community groups to organize them themselves. And we're doing that again for this election. So although there are a number of districts that have lively engaged community groups that are organizing some in-person meetings, there are 7 districts that we thought we're not going to have an all candidates meeting unless we stepped up and organized it. So that's what we're doing. And our meetings are all on Zoom. The district meetings that are organized by community groups are in person. So there's a nice diversity. And so tonight there's an in-person meeting organized by the Sydenham District Association for the Sydenham race. And tonight here on Zoom, we are able and very lucky to have a chance to meet and engage with the candidates for Lakeside. And I will hand the proceedings over to our moderator, Kate Johnson. But before I do that, let me just say a little bit about Kate. It's such a pleasure to have Kate do this for us. So thank you very much, Kate. And I'll just tell you about her. I know Kate through her work as a chaplain at Queen's, but she's got a diverse and impressive resume. She was a registered social worker and chaplain in a variety of local not-for-profits, including the Canadian Hearing Society, Kingston General Hospital, the Correctional Service of Canada, and Queen's. She left Queen's in 2021 to be more available to her family. Kate also volunteers with the Ontario chapter of the Foundation Against Intolerance and Racism, FAIR, and a little plug for that, www.fairforall.org. And she's active in the local Quaker meeting. And actually, just before I hand it over to you, Kate, I'll just mention that the Coalition of Kingston Communities has a website that you can check to find out about other meetings. And I'll put that in the chat so everyone can connect to it in case they're interested in what else is happening. That's both the in-person community group meetings as well as the ones being organized by the Coalition Board. So thank you very much, Kate, and thank you, candidates. I'm looking forward to the meeting. All the best.
Thank you, Christine, and welcome everyone. I should probably have put my dog Memphis in the bio just in case he makes an appearance during our meeting. Hopefully you'll welcome him if that's the case. He tends not to be disruptive. The proceedings for this evening are as follows. I have one question. The candidates are going to have a chance to introduce themselves. I have one question that they will both have a chance to answer. And then we will open the floor for first for Lakeside residents to ask questions of the candidates. And then if all of the Lakeside residents have had a chance to ask their questions, we can open the floor to people from further afield. You are welcome to use the chat function to say that you live in Lakeside and that you'd like to ask a question, but I also would be happy if people would use the raise hand function from Zoom. And I know there are some people who don't have to be on Zoom as much as others of us have had to be since 2020. So you would go to the bottom of your screen and reactions, and you would have the option to click on the raise hand, and that will help us to queue people's questions as well. So I'm going to introduce our candidates. Wendy Stephen is an active member of the Elementary Teachers Federation of Ontario, who has served as an elementary educator with the Limestone District School Board since 2009. As a lifelong learner, she has embraced new challenges and opportunities for growth both personally and professionally. Wendy has mentored new teachers, coached numerous kids' sports teams, and is one of the lead teachers for the Bay Ridge Public School Community Garden Partnership with Loving Spoonful. She also co-led the recent Terry Fox Run. Wendy is an advocate for strong public services, a member of the Kingston Health Coalition, and the mother of 3 girls. Wayne Hill grew up in Lakeside District and attended Queen's University, where he obtained a bachelor's degree and a master's in education. He has been a teacher, vice principal and principal here in Kingston at Holy Cross and Regiopolis since 1989. He was also named to the provincial post of President, Catholic Principals Council of Ontario, a position he retired from in 2017. He was elected to City Council in 2018, and since then has sat on or been chair of Planning Committee, Kingston Economic Development, Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority, Kingston Tourism, the Downtown Business Committee, the City Nominations Committee, the School Pedestrian Safety Committee, and has served as Deputy Mayor. He has been actively involved in the community as a coach and a volunteer, and has served on numerous local boards, such as the Boys and Girls Club, Children and Family Services, and the United Way, to name a few. He is married to Catherine, and they have 3 children and 2 grandchildren.
You're muted, Kate.
I am so sorry, people. Why didn't anybody tell me sooner?
You got to the end of my bio before you went off.
Oh, and something happened. How odd. Okay, well, I don't think I touched anything, but in any event, we're going to give Wendy the opening words tonight.
Thanks, Kate.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So hello, everyone. It is great to sort of see you here tonight. Thanks for being here. Thanks again to Christine and the Coalition of Kingston Communities. It's really great to have this opportunity to address a group. Mr. Hill, thank you for being here as well. It's good to see you as well. And I'd just like to acknowledge that we are on the land of the Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee, and I think we all appreciate their enduring presence on this land. So my name is Wendy Stephen. I live here in the Lakeside District. I am in the West Park neighborhood off Acadia Drive, and I work at Bay Ridge Public School, as you already heard. I have 3 daughters, and they're all in school now and doing well. And so I'm coming out of that little kid phase of life. And I love being a mom and I love being a teacher, but there is something else in me. And it's been brewing for a while. And I have thought for a while that we need more diversity in our political systems, including more women. And I came to the realization that I've got what it takes to learn how to do this job and do it well. So I've decided that I need to run for city council. Now, when it comes to my platform, I obviously come with my values and what I think is important to me. A couple of those things, one of them certainly is climate action. I think it needs to be at the core of all the decisions that we make, not just an afterthought. I think real reconciliation is really important. Tomorrow's Orange Shirt Day, and I think that it has to go beyond just gestures of symbolism and actually meaningful listening and consulting and following through. Affordability is another thing that I come to the table thinking is very important. We need housing for all. Obviously, we have a significant difficulty, as does everyone at this time. And food security is a very real issue for people across our city, province, and country, certainly. That said, while I'm coming with things that I care about, my platform ultimately has to come from you. So from the people of Lakeside. At the doors, I've been hearing a lot of different things, and that's the kind of stuff that we need to carry forward and try to make some gains on. A big one that I've been hearing about is safety, in particular speeding. That's the hugest thing that people are talking about, and they're worried about children in school zones. I could list the streets, and I'd be happy to later if anyone's interested. Also road infrastructure. School zones parking is a big thing that's come up. Flooding, safety issues as well, and some theft too. Affordability's come up as well with inflation. Things are tight, and so we need to make sure we're supporting vulnerable people, but also still providing services to the middle class so that we're stretching every dollar as far as it will go. And finally, the third thing that I'm hearing at the doors is people want really strong representation. So they want someone who's committed to listen and follow through and respond. I'm committed to that. And I know we might not get the outcome that you hope for. I mean, that's never a guarantee. But I think it's really important to know that as your counselor, I would work with the city, but I would work for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Councillor Hill.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for organizing and for being here tonight. My name is Wayne Hill. I'm currently the counselor for Lakeside District. I've lived nearly my whole life here. As a youth, I went to Frontenac High School and Queen's University. I graduated as a teacher in 1982. I'm married to Catherine, as was mentioned earlier, and we've got 3 kids, Megan, Thomas, and Grace, who were all raised in this neighborhood and schooled here in Lakeside. Catherine and I are also the proud grandparents of Ellie and Giselle. For most of my career, I was a high school principal, both at Holy Cross and for the final 11 years of my career at Regiopolis. I have been very active in the community all through those years, as a youth coach, as a volunteer at the United Way, as a member of a variety of different boards, such as Children and Family Services, the Boys and Girls Club, and the Algonquin and Lakeshore Foundation. I believe that any candidate for public office should commit to 2 terms. It takes a while to get oneself acclimatized to the workings of municipal government, so it's a real challenge to hit the ground running. I have that experience now and the understanding of how to get things done that I think will allow me to get started right away on the priorities that I've outlined on my website at waynehill.org. And those are priorities that I've heard come from you. I hope that you'll go onto the website and check out more information on my candidacy. When I first ran for office, I promised to push council to recognize and address the aging infrastructure in suburbs such as Lakeside, and to push for greater economic development for our community that would help to provide employment opportunities that would keep our kids in Kingston. We've made a great deal of progress on infrastructure, including road paving, improved intersection lighting along Days Road, a lighted crosswalk at Front Road, improvements to our local parks, and active transportation routes such as the Henderson bike path and walking path, to name a few. We've certainly made progress as well in attracting new businesses to Kingston, and especially tech-focused startups that will provide employment options for our youth. I've loved the opportunity to represent Lakesiders at the council table. Although I am proud of my accomplishments and the accomplishments of this council, clearly there's more to be done. I believe that I have the experience, the time, and the initiative to ensure that you continue to see progress on your issues and the other local priorities that are so important to making a great community. Thank you. And thank you to the coalition for organizing tonight.
Right. Thank you, Wayne. Thank you, Wendy. So the one question that I have for you that each of you will have a chance to answer is, what is the biggest issue that you are hearing from constituents in your district, and what steps will you take to address this concern if you are elected? So Wayne?
Sure, well, Wendy mentioned it. I think you're going to hear, any candidate is going to hear this at every door, and it's road safety and street safety in general in our district. I think I'm sure that I've heard about that more than any other single issue. And after the tragic death of that young student at Mother Teresa, I asked to be able to chair the working group on student to school safe pedestrian working group. So I learned a great deal about traffic safety and the challenges that enforcement and calming have. And there's a lot of challenges. One of the biggest issues is, there's a lack of police and police particularly that are assigned to traffic issues, that sort of thing. So I'm committed to seeing that the recommendations of that working group get implemented. And you've seen some of that already start to happen. So the community safety zones are in place at 2 schools, and they will eventually be in place at all of the schools, and hopefully in our neighborhood schools by Christmas of next year. So that's important, or sorry, Christmas, this coming Christmas. So that's important. That's a very critical part of this, because that'll also allow us to install radar detection for speeding and that sort of thing. So that's a big step in terms of enforcement, because we're simply never going to have the money to be able to afford police officers on every corner. I think it's really important that we look at as a city what we're doing around housing and affordable housing. I mean, that's another critical issue. So I think it's even though Lakeside, may not be as impacted directly around the housing and affordability issue, it's a concern for everyone. It's especially a concern in terms of the rising prices of houses that we've seen in the community, the lack of housing stock that's available. It's going to be very difficult for us to provide affordable housing until we have enough housing stock for everyone. And so we need to really take a long look at that. 1 unit of housing costs us about $500,000 to build. So a 1% tax increase really only builds 2 units of affordable housing. And that's just not going to get it done. So we have to take a look at what the other levels of government are doing. We have to push as a council and work with other municipalities to push the provincial and federal governments to make some significant investments in housing. So those are 2 of the biggest issues that I see facing our community right now.
Thank you, Wayne. Wendy?
Could you restate the question, please?
Sure. It is, what is the biggest issue that you're hearing about from constituents, and what would you do about it if you were elected?
Okay, thank you. So yes, the biggest issue that I'm hearing at the doors across the district is, again, road safety. It's coming down to speed in particular. Our police budget, to my understanding, is, it's always over. We're trying really hard, or the police are trying really hard to do what they need to do within the constraints of the budget, and it's constantly being pushed. So we have a staffing issue, certainly at the city. We have some, fantastic officers, but we don't have enough. So when it comes to enforcement, we don't have the manpower to do that, and that's what people really want. That said, we have a lot of really great technological solutions now. We've seen there are red light cameras around the city at various intersections. There are speed cameras that exist. And I think ultimately, we're talking about calming strategies versus enforcement, right? So we know that enforcement is what actually has the teeth to change behavior. Calming strategies, people just get used to things and then they just adapt, right? It's what we do really well. So we need, deterrents that actually have teeth. So speed cameras in school zones might be something worth considering. Again, I think that technology just ultimately is the way to go. And as far as what I would do, and what I've been trying to do up to this point as well, is listen, document, respond, and certainly encourage people to make reports to Kingston Police when it's appropriate, because again, there's not everything the city can do when it comes to enforcement. And also I know that, bylaws are complaint driven. So when it comes to safety, for example, Our Lady of Lourdes School, I know some people are concerned because there's no parking there, but parents do park there because they're dropping their children off and kids are running and parents are there, and it's a pretty big mess. But that's something that needs to be reported to bylaw if anything's actually going to change. So sort of directing people to the appropriate place where they can lodge their complaints, and then again, being that go-between advocate who can try to help follow through. And again, like I said in my opening, we might not always get the result we want, but certainly, I'll see it through with you. That's what I'm here to do. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Wendy. So that's the only question I have for our panel, our candidates. And for the rest of the time, we're going to turn it over to the neighborhood. So it would be helpful to me. I'm going to work on the honor system, people. If you live in the neighborhood, if you could use the raise hand function under reactions, that would be super helpful. And Ron, I saw you getting excited earlier, so you're definitely first in line. Go ahead, please. Oh, you need to unmute, please, Ron.
Can you hear me now?
We can, yes.
Okay, great. My question for the two candidates relates to surveillance, specifically to our city contracting with ethically dubious private sector firms to glean protected personal information from publicly accessible websites for purposes of bylaw enforcement. Addressing council, the Commissioner of Community Service referred to this practice as, quote, proactive enforcement, unquote, a term which kind of resonates with totalitarian regimes, not Kingston. Yet, pursuant to a motion by Councillor Hill, the city entered into a one-year $18,000 contract for such services, which was bitterly opposed, produced little, and was not renewed. I asked the contestants whether or not they would support future contracts of that ilk without first conducting an open and meaningful public consultation with Kingstonians on whether or not they would countenance such approaches to bylaw enforcement.
Thank you. So for these questions, we're going to try to stick to the 90-second limit, and we'll start with Wendy.
Thanks for the question, Ron. You had a lot of information there, so if I missed the point, I hope you'll come back to me. So when it comes to proactive enforcement, it sounds kind of like we're talking about internet surveillance. And I'm wondering if you're referencing Airbnb, perhaps. Yeah. So we have an interesting situation here where, again, I'm learning about this problem. I don't have all the understanding yet. But we have a problem where it seems to me there's been a broad stroke applied to something where there is a little bit more nuance. So we're talking about places that are maybe, the city thinks are not complying with certain regulations or bylaws or what have you. But it seems to me as well, there's a difference between a whole house that is up for rent and concerns about that, as opposed to, like, I met someone yesterday whose two kids are at university, and to help pay for the $50,000 that it's costing them, they're renting out a room. So I'm opposed to any kind of surveillance, especially with a third party. It seems like not a good use of taxpayer money, particularly when there is a public platform in Airbnb that you could consult. I think that in the current situation we're in with respect to housing, this is a kind of a drop in the bucket. And honestly, I don't know that it's worth the city's attention, truly. Is this something very, very serious that needs regulation at this time? So I'm open to further discussion and learning on this, but no, I don't support surveillance of that kind.
Thank you, Wendy. Wayne?
Thank you. Thanks, Ron, for the question. Ron and I have had this debate for a fairly lengthy period of time. This does have to do with short-term leasing arrangements, and I think what he's talking about is Harmari, which was a company that was being contracted with to basically scan websites to look for information related to where rental units, short-term rental units were located, because the city was asking for licensing and business verification for those to put them on kind of an equal playing field with the hotels and motels in the city, who currently charge a visitor tax that goes into promoting tourism in Kingston. So the only way to do that, and of course this was pre-pandemic because a lot of the short-term rentals came off the market during the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, the only way to do that was to either agree that we were going to use just one provider, that would be Airbnb, and ask that anybody who does short-term rentals register with them, or we recognize that different Airbnb or different short-term rental operators can use different platforms in order to do that. So this was a way of making sure that we knew where the short-term rentals were in the community. It was certainly something as well that the police suggested was a good idea. It was not really surveillance. I don't think you could really call it that. It was described at council meeting as if someone was going to stand on people's lawns and check with them about whether or not they were offering their property up as a short-term rental. That was never the case. I think Ron mentioned himself that it was a $19,000 contract. So how much surveillance do you think you would get from that kind of a contract? It really was just about identifying which properties were being advertised as short-term rentals and making sure that they were licensed, that the city was aware of them, and that they were following the same rules as all of our hotels and motels. One of our objectives is to keep people safe, and this is certainly having these businesses register, as all businesses are required to register in the city of Kingston, is a good idea. And so I continue to support that as if it's necessary. It isn't necessary now because the volume of short-term rentals has really declined over the course of the pandemic. It may come back again, and if it does come back again, then I think it would be something that we would have to take a long look at. But I definitely agree with Ron that the consultation was not as effective as it should have been, and we would want to ensure that consultation takes place.
Thank you. Joan.
Hello. I'm Joan Jardin, and I'd like to know if you would, each of you, would commit to funding municipal long-term care homes to provide safe, quality living and caring environments and support a minimum care standard of 4 hours of daily hands-on care. And of course, with that too, I am asking if you would commit to definitely opposing contracting out of the operation of municipal long-term care homes to for-profit companies.
Wayne?
Sure. Long-term care support is critical to the community. We have a couple of long-term care facilities currently. I think that our hope on council, and certainly my hope, would be that we are able to extend the amount of care that folks are getting. But I think we also, this is another, classic example of where we need assistance from other levels of government, because long-term care homes are very expensive to run. They should be expensive to run. The reality is we should be providing more than adequate care for our seniors. And I don't know that we're in a position to be able to say across the province, certainly, that that's happening in every locale. I would love to see all long-term care come under the jurisdiction of the municipality or of the province, because really healthcare and long-term care, in my estimation, is healthcare, should be a provincial responsibility and should be funded appropriately by the province. And that's currently not happening. We need to make sure that does happen. And again, we need to work with our other municipalities throughout the province to ensure that pressure is being brought on the provinces and the politicians at Queen's Park to ante up and help us out with this, because it's a critical problem now, and it's going to get more critical as our population continues to age. Thank you.
Wendy?
Thank you. Wayne, it's like you read my mind. You pretty much said everything I was thinking, so well done. That said, I think one thing I would like to add is, during COVID, it was really, really clear the difference between public and private long-term care. What happened in long-term care homes that are privatized and for profit is frankly criminal. Never should have happened and should never be allowed to happen again. So I think that when we're talking about long-term care municipally, absolutely, that is the right choice. We need public long-term care. We need public health care, period. So that's pretty much what I can add without, I may as well not continue repeating. So thanks for your question, Joe.
Thanks. All right. I'll just remind people that it can be really, given that this is a local meeting, it would be helpful to have questions that apply specifically to district needs. If anybody has such a question, I encourage you to raise your hand. Sheila.
Okay. Oh gosh, sorry, I'm having trouble getting my camera back on. Okay. Well, I think this is actually, it's local in that the property exists in our area, but I think it's something that should be of interest to the entire city because of its significance, and that's the Lemoyne Point Farm. I'm sure most people are familiar with the fact that Mary Fraser, who owned the farm, died back in the spring, and some of us are very concerned about what's going to happen with that property. It is just south of the Lemoyne Point Conservation Area, and so I'm wondering what the candidates would be willing to do in terms of protecting that property going forward and what their vision would be for it.
Okay. Wendy, would you like to take that question?
Yeah, thanks for your question, Sheila. So I'm a huge fan of Lemoyne Point. In fact, I was there this afternoon before coming here to burn off some energy. And it's unfortunate that Mary died. It's interesting now that this is up for discussion because this is something outside of the family, right? And I'm wondering what other people in our district are wanting. Certainly preservation is a good idea. Obviously development of that land is inappropriate in my opinion, but I'm wondering what the constituents have to say about what they would like to see done with that. Whether it become, you know, a hobby farm or an educational setting. We know at Lakeside Community Garden, there is now farm training happening for agriculture. I wonder if that is something that might also be appropriate in the Lemoyne Point area. With the farm infrastructure already there, it would be interesting to see what could be used or brought from there. Agritourism is a thing as well. Maybe that's an option here. And again, like without the expertise myself, I'd be interested in hearing what other people say. But like I said, ultimately, we need to preserve this space. It is a beautiful part of the property here in the West End, and it should remain undeveloped. Thanks.
Wayne?
Thanks, and you know, I echo what Wendy said in terms of preserving this for as a legacy property for the enjoyment of Kingstonians in general, because you know, it is certainly a beautiful, beautiful piece of property. I believe that the will of council will be to try to preserve this, to enter into an arrangement with the family. You know, obviously, there are some discussions happening already, and I think at the end of the day, that will be the direction that the city would like to go in. What it would look like, I think it, you know, remains to be seen. I think it would, you know, be most appropriate to be preserved in the condition that it's currently in, and to be really an extension of the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority. I sit on that the Cataraqui board, and certainly there's some synergies that can happen between them and the city. For example, one of the things we're looking at doing is trying to improve the parking lots. I know if anybody's tried to drive into those, they're you take your life in your hands. So that we've already come to an agreement to work with the city to do that. I think hopefully the Cataraqui Region Conservation Authority and the city can work to protect and preserve this land for future generations. You know, the other thing is we want to make it more accessible to people. Right now, if you don't drive or cycle, then you have a lot of trouble getting there. So we'd like to see that bus route 15 be extended out to Lemoyne Point, and hopefully this new piece of property, and make it available to anybody who can access public transportation. So I think this would be the classic example of the kind of property that Kingston should preserve for its citizens and should preserve for future generations, and along the way make it more accessible for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, if I could just supplementary, would that be all right?
Sure.
Sure. So I understand there's, you know, potentially conversations going on with the family about a potential purchase, and there have been those sorts of discussions for the past 30 years since the development was stopped on that property that Ross Grieve was trying to do ages ago. So I think ultimately, really the only way to protect that property is to have some sort of a public purchase. And there are always lots of priorities in the city, but in my view, this is something that if we lose this time, it's going to be gone forever. So given all those things, are you willing to vote to spend city money on purchasing that property?
Absolutely. You know, there's more urgency since Mrs. Fraser has passed away. And I absolutely, and I think whoever the councillor is for Lakeside District should be leading the charge in terms of making sure that the council is convinced to do that. I believe that at least the council that I'm working with right now, I believe very strongly that that would be their will. And I suspect that would be the will of the next council as well.
Hear, hear.
Okay. Thank you. All right, Sherry.
So Wayne, I wanted to congratulate you for the work that you've done on at City Hall, and you talked a lot about the committees that you've sat on, and it's wonderful work that you've done. But I think I'm just wanting to raise the issue again, and Wendy has certainly raised it from her discussions with people at the door about the traffic and the speeding in the area. I know when you go to other parts of the city, they do have traffic calming. I saw a while ago on the news that the people that live on the Woodbine Road were complaining about the fact that people were using it as a shortcut and really driving too quickly through there. So when I drove by there just recently, they've got, big slow on the road. They've got signs, they've got all sorts of traffic calming things. And it's something that has been not only during your tenure, but in the last person who was a councillor, and I believe the person before, it's been an ongoing issue in the neighborhood where people really drive too quickly. There's some, the parks are heavily used now. And I just think more and more we need to be concerned about that and about traffic calming in some way. So again, thank you for the work that you've done.
Do you want me to respond to that, Kate?
Yeah, sure. And then we'll give Wendy a chance.
Sure.
As well.
Yeah. Well, I would have to say the school pedestrian working group was kind of my proudest moment in terms of being on council. Obviously it came in the wake of a terrible tragedy, but what you saw around Holy Cross and Lancaster Road is a product of that. So the speed limits have all been reduced to in those school zones, and not just in the school zones, but in areas where you would enter into a school zone. So you'll see those kind of road markings, the new streets signage. If you were following on Facebook last week, or on Twitter, I guess, the traffic safety department from the Kingston Police were issuing tickets in those zones, and also up around Lord Strathcona School. So those community safety zones, which are fairly broad, they're not just around the school as in the past, but they're all on all streets leading into the school zone, will really help to slow traffic down, and the commitment on the part of the police force and the traffic unit in particular is to ensure that they have resources in at least 2 of those zones every single day. So that's a great step forward. It also will allow us, by the introduction of the community safety zone, will allow us to include radar, speed radar in selected areas, typically around schools. But again, it's all those kinds of things that work towards, educating drivers, framing the street for them better, making sure that people are aware of, the need to be safe as a driver on all of our streets. So what's interesting though is that everybody is looking for something different. So the bollards, some people like them, some people don't. The speed humps, some people like them, some people don't. 4-way stops. And it was interesting because I thought 4-way stops were a no-brainer, that would absolutely slow traffic down and make a big difference. But by way of example, what the police and bylaw find is that people start to run those if they don't see a real need for them. And then they actually become more hazardous. Speed bumps are terrible for anybody who's riding in an ambulance and for public transportation. So there's lots of things that seem like there's simple answers, but they're not. But collectively, we can come together, and I think the community school safety zones are a really good example of how the community came together to come up with some real good solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Wendy, do you want to add anything to that?
I do, thanks. So I think we have an interesting problem here in that the suburbs were built around cars, right? If we could go back in time and remake that decision, that would be fantastic. But here we are, completely reliant on cars. So one thing that I see is that we need to make public transportation, we need to make active transit, whether it's walking or biking, easier, safer, and a better option than driving. Because drivers, again, the traffic calming, like people like it at first and then they just get used to it. Enforcement, as we said before, we don't have enough police officers who can do this at all times. Yes, there are technological enforcement options that we can explore, but ultimately we need to make our city more walkable, bikeable, and more desirable for public transit. That's where we should be focusing our energy. Just like to the climate crisis, the solution isn't electric cars. The solution is getting off cars. That's a huge piece of this puzzle. Other cities have done it so successfully. Places in Europe, like there are leaders in the world that we can look to for this kind of work if we're actually committed to making this change. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Anne and Ruth.
Okay, it's Ruth Wood, and I'm interested in the fact that you know, everybody has their opinions about how the best way to proceed, and everybody has their passions on what's most important. And I'd like to ask both of the councillors to give us an idea of how you would look after trying to serve all of your constituents in a fair way.
Wendy?
Sure. Thanks for your question, either Anne or Ruth. I'm not sure which of you was speaking at that moment.
That was Anne. That was Ruth. It was Ruth.
Oh, it was Ruth. Okay, thanks.
Ruth. I'm sorry.
Yeah, that's a really good question. It's really complicated, isn't it? Where you can't please everyone, no matter what you're doing. So I think there has to be sort of an understanding that you truly can't please everyone. And if you're trying to, you're just going to burn out trying. I know from my teaching practice, just as one example, one of the things we really try to consider is you're hitting the big middle, right? That's where you're having the most bang for your buck. However, you cannot ignore the people who are in the margins, is what we call it right now in education. So we need to be considering all perspectives across the board, advocating on behalf of people, helping them to advocate for themselves. Again, personally, when it comes to my own values, I may need to draw a line or a boundary. And that's not to say that that person can't pursue, but it might be that, you know, if it comes to racism or other homophobic things, you know, things that to me are just not okay, then I would certainly be seeking help for what to do about that with this person in order that they can get the help they need, but that I'm not compromising on what I know to be true, and especially when we're talking about human rights. So in general, I think, again, trying to be sympathetic, empathetic, listening, understanding, and having a conversation. Facebook, I don't think, is the best place for that. It can get kind of ugly at times. And so I would much prefer to, you know, have email correspondence or ultimately set up a phone call or an in-person talk. I think that's the best way that you can find common ground and really find understanding with each other. So that would be the way I would try to go about it. Thanks.
Wayne?
Well, you can't really say consultation enough, right? I mean, you need to be out there, you need to be speaking to people, you need to find ways that people can interact with you. And one of the things that I've tried to do is to use social media as broadly as I can. I got reprimanded for putting too many comments on one local group site the other day, but I'm trying to make sure that you know, I get the message out and try to explain the decisions, try to consult with people ahead of time as best I can. You know, when we had some challenging debates at council and people wondered about the decision making, you know, the McDonald's statue was a good example of that. The decision to bring the sleeping cabins to Center 70 was another one. You know, I spent a lot of time talking to people, explaining the rationale for the decisions, and then seeking input, you know, in terms of next directions and best steps. So it is all about consultation. It's all about being able to listen to differing points of view. That's a challenge. You know, people tend to think that everyone else in the world views the world through their same lens, and they don't. And yet they all bring very valuable experience and knowledge to the table. So you have to be willing to listen to different points of view and try to, at the end of the day, make a decision that best meets the needs of the city as a whole.
Thank you. Are you good, Ruth? Excellent. All right, Sue Chamberlain, please.
Hello. I live in the Point Pleasant, Redendale area, and I think you are both aware that we are concerned about flooding issues increasing in our area due to the rate of infill that's going on and the lack of compliance to the local bylaws by the new builds, in particular, the 30% landscaped rule, which does not appear to be adhered to. So I'm just interested to hear how you will respond to this and how you will address it.
I'm afraid I've lost track of who went first last time. So
I think it's me this time.
Okay, thank you, Wayne.
No problem. Thanks, Sue. And we had such a prolonged debate about this, you know, in the early year of or the first year, I guess, of my term, and I think at the end of Laura Turner's term, this is a challenging question because it also impacts property values, and that's what we found. That there was a lot of endorsement of the notion of trying to maintain the neighborhood, the character of the neighborhood, and yet a lot of developers were offering homeowners lots of money to purchase their property to build some of these bigger houses that you're referring to, Sue, and they're having an impact on the water management in that district for sure. I think the thing is that the rules that have been put in place are a reasonable compromise, but they have to be followed. So if there are builders or there are particular projects that you're aware of that are not following the rules that as they are laid out, then you need to either contact bylaw or the building services department at the city of Kingston, or me, because I can assist in making those connections, because that was one of the things that we said at the end when those rules were implemented and the Redendale study was completed, that the expectations are now clear for builders, and those rules have to be followed. That is part of our zoning bylaws now, and that's a clear expectation. So enforcement is the next step. If they're not doing it, you need to let someone know, and certainly if I can be of assistance, and I will.
Wendy?
Thanks for your question, Sue. Sorry about the flooding too. I think that we have a problem here. So there's something not sitting right with me. So we've got people who are building new houses, and that house has, ticked all the boxes, and so it's built. And then we have this impact on neighbors. And so then we're being told, so if your basement is flooding as an example, we think it's being caused by this. It never happened before. Now it is. And then we've got the situation wherein the developer is not responsible. You've got this basement that's flooding that you're paying for. What do you sue your neighbor? It doesn't create community in any way, shape, or form. We're just having people stressed out and mad at each other. Property damage, large expenses. Our basement flooded. I know what that's like. It's awful. I think that one of the things we need to consider is that this needs to be a planning matter. So there's an official plan review process coming in 2023. I wonder if maybe the impacts of climate change have not been considered, and they should be. So I have noticed, and again, this is not based on science, this is anecdotal, but the rain we're getting now is not the same as the rain we were getting before. We are getting torrential downpours now, insanely torrential downpours. So I question if there is something there in addition to the building and the land coverage that you're talking about. Certainly on top of this, if we've got water draining down the hill towards the lake, it sounds like there are infrastructure problems, whether it's with ditches or other drainage types of situations. And so those need to get resolved. And again, as councillor, I can't promise the outcome, but what I can promise is that I care, and I would try to work with you to talk to city staff. This is something that's an issue for Redendale neighborhood. And you deserve a response. Thanks.
Thank you, Wendy. Amber, your question, please.
Hi, give me 1 second. I'm just, oh, there I am. Sorry, I'm in the dark. Hi, both Wayne and Wendy. I'm just actually curious. You touched a little bit on it at the beginning of this whole conversation, but we've noticed, we've lived in this neighborhood in the Lakeside district a long time, and we've noticed an increase in nighttime activity in our own neighborhood, in different people's, whether it's break-ins into people's cars. We've actually recently had activity in our own driveway that has forced us to install outdoor cameras. And it seems to be increasing. My husband and I were active in a lot of the social media neighborhood platforms on Facebook and things like that. And there is an overall agreement that sort of criminal activity has increased definitely in our area. And as a parent of a child with exceptionalities, that's really unnerving for me in many ways. And so I'm just curious as to how this is being addressed and how moving forward, especially given the comments earlier with regards to restrictions and in police enforcement and that type of thing. So thank you.
All right, Wendy, I believe it's your turn.
Hi, Amber. Thanks for your question. You look cozy. I'm freezing in my basement right now. So I think this one's tricky because I'm thinking of it from the lens of a counselor. As a citizen, like as a person who is living this, my advice to you, if you were my friend or my neighbor who was asking me this, I would say, oh my gosh, report to the police. Only when we are bombarded with reports is it likely that we're going to get a response, right? So showing not just you, but like everyone who this is happening to, report it. In teaching, I know we think about a paper trail, right? Like you're documenting everything, and that's a really official way of documenting in one place. So I think that's super important. I think that the community sharing it's weird. I have mixed feelings, right? Because we're dealing with like cameras and things like that, but I think it's kind of amazing the way the community is coming together. It's like a modern neighborhood watch almost. So I think that that's pretty powerful. I wish I had an answer. I don't know. But I think that by talking about these things, sharing with our neighbors, like communicating and not keeping any of this stuff to ourselves is certainly a big way to go. Knowing our neighbors, watching out for each other, that's going to probably build the strongest community and be the strongest deterrent. But it is tricky in the suburbs because a lot of us are working during the day and sleeping at night, right? So we're on a similar schedule a lot of the time, which can complicate things. So yeah, but again, at the end, I think just report every time. Thanks.
Wayne?
Yeah, thank you. And I have had a couple of conversations with Chief McNeely about these kinds of issues. And, at the end of the day, if you look at communities like Barrie, like Guelph, like London, and look at how they're policed relative to their population, well, we're under that based on a population that doesn't reflect our true population. So, Kingston is policed on the basis of 125,000 people, but we're really home to about 160 or 170,000 people with all the students that are here. So we are desperately under policed. And I would think that on any given night, it would be difficult, especially when the students are up to some of their shenanigans. It would be difficult to ensure that there's a regular patrol going through this neighborhood. And that's what I've been talking to Chief McNeely about, because this is not acceptable. We are going to have to look at our levels of policing, I should say, and enforcement. It has to come up. We have to be able to, even from a policing perspective, like if something really serious happened in this neighborhood, what would the response time be here? You know, and because you know, quite honestly, most of our policing efforts are focused on the downtown. So, you know, it is a safe neighborhood. It continues to be a safe neighborhood. There are certainly, as Amber referred to, there's certainly been some incidents of prowling and kind of nighttime vandalism and that sort of thing. And as Wendy said, you know, to report. It's really, really critical. And I'm happy to do it on anyone's behalf if you feel uncomfortable in doing it. But you know, if we're going to increase the level of policing in this district, then we're going to have to show evidence why it's required. And I think, you know, I think people recognize that and are doing that now. And I think we just have to kind of continue that. But at the council level, we have to look at our level of policing, police staffing, and make sure that it's really adequate to meet the needs of this community. And right now, I would say it is not.
Okay, may I add just one more thought?
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Just through listening to Wayne, it also makes me wonder if this has been an increase and it wasn't like this before. I'm wondering why. Why do we have this increase happening in the West End in particular? So again, I don't have the answer to that question, but that's my big wonder. And I wonder if it's connected to all of the other things going on, whether it's affordability, whether it's the lack of appropriate health services. Again, this is downloading on municipalities from the higher levels of government, but I question if, you know, social determinants of health, family structure, all of these pieces that we know strengthen communities. If things are starting to fall apart for people in certain ways, they don't have the support networks they need. They've got, I don't know, too much free time, it's hard to say, or they're doing this as a means of survival. So I think that we really need to consider why this is happening, in addition to considering how we mitigate or enforce and protect. Thanks.
Thank you. Since Joan has already had a chance to ask a question, I'm going to give Chris Morris the last question this evening, and then our candidates will have a chance to give closing statements.
Sure.
Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, Wayne. Hi, Wendy. Congratulations on running again. Wanted to ask about the climate emergency, which City Council declared, I think, in 2019. But this year alone, we've had a couple of hundred Corvette cars downtown Kingston. We've invited cruise ships, and the Polka Run returned this year as well. I can't find any rationale for having both those three things along with the climate emergency. So Wayne, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that from the council side, and Wendy, I'd like to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Wayne first.
Okay, thanks, Chris. It does seem a little it's a challenge to rationalize that, that's for sure. I think the reality right now is that we're looking at the big picture. So there's still the opportunity for people to conduct business, and that business is going to continue. So, you know, that whether that poker run happens in Kingston or it happens in Brockville, the GHG emissions are still going to occur, and someone's going to welcome that because it does provide lots of business into your community. That would be the same thing with cruise ships, and the same thing with some of the other activities that you mentioned. The big picture is that we're trying to make significant changes in the way that we do things in general that are going to have a real impact on greenhouse gas emissions. Like you see that debate happening right now in the city when we're talking about, you know, woodlots versus infill development, and kind of changing the way that we do things, like, you know, trying to get people to utilize active transportation and those kinds of things that are going to make significant impacts. All of that's going to change the mindset of the community, but it's going to take some time. I suspect, if not already, in the very near future, a lot of those kinds of activities will not be welcomed in communities. I think that's how we're evolving. I think that's how Kingston will evolve. But I also think that that the market for those kinds of things will dry up as well, you know, as people become more educated and more involved in trying to reach some of the targets that our municipalities are setting. It's a tough challenge at the start because there are all kinds of things that we can point at that say, you know, that's not really in line with our thinking around climate change, and it isn't. And you know, but we're not going to change everything. Rome wasn't built in a day, and it's going to take longer for us to get around some of these some of the big significant things in place, and the mindset change that needs to happen. But until that happens, it's a little bit like oil and gas companies. You know, they still provide a product, and they will until we've completely reduced our reliance on them. That product is still out there because some people want to access it, and it still is a community that welcomes businesses, and not all of them are you know, I guess in line with the thinking of council, but hopefully over time we will change that thinking. Thanks.
Wendy?
Thank you. Hi, Chris. Thanks for your question. I think that the answer to why these things are happening is pretty clear, right? Like, it's money. That's why these decisions are being made. And I think that's where the hypocrisy lies in basically every government we've ever had, right? So we say all these grand things and then we do something different. I think that part of the thing is that the people that we're electing aren't willing to make the change in the thinking, or aren't thinking differently yet. We need to change how we think. We need to make choices and show that we are actually committed to resolving this climate crisis. We can't say like, yeah, but, right? There are other ways. Again, I'm not naive to the fact that this is like a lot of money. I get that, but there are other ways, and we have incredible people in this town who are so innovative. There have to be other ways to make this amount of money in a different way. So I just think, again, I understand it is more complex than simple. However, ultimately, it just comes down to, what do we believe in? What do we care about? And what are we actually going to do about it? Thanks.
Right. So Wendy, we're doing primacy and recency. I'm going to give you a chance to say your closing words, and then Wayne will have the very closing words. Thank you.
The final word. Amazing. All right. Thank you to Christine again for organizing this meeting tonight. Kate, you were a great moderator. I appreciate your patience and your timing as well. Mr. Hill, thank you again. It's always a pleasure to have discussions with you. And everyone who showed up tonight, wow, amazing. I hope you're in your comfies with an adult beverage and you're warmer than me in my basement. To sum up this evening, what I want to say to you is that I am listening to what matters to you. So I am at the doors, I am having conversations, I am emailing, I am phoning. And to anyone who's worried about my time management, I've already talked to HR, and if I'm elected, I will reduce to half-time teaching. Okay, so that is taken care of. I have an amazingly supportive husband. My kids are cheering me on. This is a family affair. So I want this, I've got this. I've got the skills, I've got the energy, I've got the drive, and I want to learn how to do this well. We need to think differently, and we need to move past the status quo. We need more women representing us. We need more balance in the representation that we're seeing. And if you actually want things to change, maybe you need to vote for a candidate who's a little different from what you've had traditionally. I really hope that if anything else comes up you want to discuss further, you will reach out. I'm here for these conversations, as I know Mr. Hill would be too. And I really hope that, in October, I want you to elect me. I'm Wendy Stephen. I've got this. I'm here for you. Let's make a change. Let's do this. Thank you.
Thank you, Wendy. Wayne?
Thank you. Thank you, Wendy. And thank you to the organizers, Christine and Kate, for moderating, and for all you folks who took time out of your evening to join us in this session. It's really a nice opportunity to be able to speak to people. I mean, it's not quite the same as being able to do it at the doors, but it's the next best thing. So thank you all for organizing. I guess I just want to say that it has been an absolutely tremendous honor for me to be able to serve in this capacity. I've had a great privilege of working with young people in our community for a long time, of getting to know the people who live in Lakeside over basically my whole life. And it's just, it's a tremendous opportunity. It has been a tremendous opportunity for me to be able to give a little something back to the community. You know, it's the democratic process is a wonderful thing, and we're very, very fortunate to have it. And we see around the world that not everyone does enjoy that opportunity. So I think at the end of the day, I hope that I will be your choice again for councillor. But the most important thing is to get out and vote, to make sure that you have your say, and don't miss that opportunity, because we have been seeing a kind of a decline in voter turnout in recent elections, and we certainly want to try to reverse that trend. So whoever your choice is, hopefully it's me, but if not, at least get out and vote. Thank you very much for this evening.
All right, and I too would like to thank everybody for participating. Not just our candidates who are taking the brave step in this age of social media to be getting into politics and staying in politics, but also to Christine for her concern for democratic participation, and everybody who turned out tonight. It is indeed important that we not take democracy for granted. So it's wonderful to have such good turnout, and I hope you will go back to the websites of our candidates and make a really informed decision. Thank you so much, everyone, and good night.